We're talking about how to simplify and automate QBRs with CloudRadial. Great topic. This is cool. If you've never seen CloudRadial, I'll show you a little bit. It's going to be a little bit of a hands-on stuff because that's usually the way we roll with our discussions. I'm going to talk about how you kind of put together a QBR in CloudRadial, the thought process behind it, some of the stuff that we usually talk about. Again, if you're watching this, if you sign up to take a look at this, you're probably coming from one of three stages. I actually talked about this with our clients that are, using CloudRadial today, and hopefully it'll help you figure out exactly where it fits in for you. So we're going to cover a few different use cases, anywhere from you don't really have a QBR process, trying to figure out if CloudRadial is a good fit or what it can do. The middle kind of stage of that is going to be whether you have tried a couple QBR tools, you're familiar with some kind of a business review process, and you want to see how that works. And then the third stage is if you're evaluating something like CloudRadial or CloudRadial itself, and you want to figure out how you can kind of just elevate and automate a lot of these QBRs and just get the most out of your processes and stitch them together. So we're going to cover all that, how to approach it, how to look at it, and let's get started. So if you are unfamiliar with the Zoom process, I'll cut myself off and say, if you have any questions, anything comes up, please use the Q&A in Zoom, and Crystal will help me to answer questions or funnel them to me so I can answer them organized, kind of. I try, but sometimes I steamroll stuff. And yeah, there's not too many of you, so I think the chat's probably okay too, but we usually prefer the Q&A. Okay, so just because I have to do it and they want me to make sure that you know, CloudRadial is a CSA platform, which means that if you've never heard of CloudRadial, you're not sure why you're here. We're talking about CloudRadial is our brand, our CSA is our primary tool, our primary platform, our primary product, and that's really where the QBRs kind of take place. And CloudRadial is a CSA, and that stands for Client Services Automation, the same way that your PSA, Professional Services Automation, is kind of like your home base for your tickets, for your billing, your technicians. This is more of a client home base. So we're trying to take that IT service delivery gap, trying to figure out where the client fits in. And as it relates to QBRs, and again, I'll give you a live example, we're going to talk about how important it is to mix both the technical and the non-technical to make the QBR process collaborative, which we see really good results on, and that's kind of the crux of how this whole thing comes together. So with that being said, let's talk about the specifics of when we say, simplifying and automating QBRs. We kind of have to understand how we're approaching it because CloudRadial is not your traditional QBR tool in that we have a different methodology, which I'll cover that in just a moment. It's not inherently a one-click, let's just boom, figure out every single thing and then move on to the next thing. It's kind of up to you on how you approach it. So unfortunately for me, but fortunately for you, if you're trying to be like, what does this do? You can approach it different ways, which is what makes it a little bit more difficult and to explain, but I have plenty of time on this webinar, and we're going to talk about how might you specifically approach QBRs in CloudRadial, again, specifically with what features, and then once you lock that in, how easy, what does it look like to repeat that process and kind of give those QBRs to your clients and how to repeat that process? And the answer is it's very easy, and it's pretty well thought out on how you can repeat it. So again, show you some literal ways to do it. So why do I start with methodology, and why do I always begin this talking about how to approach it? Well, because our industry is kind of all over the place. We've talked to thousands collectively here at CloudRadial, thousands of individual MSPs, and that means lots of people in those MSPs. And when I talk about methodologies, I'm talking about how you approach that and how you kind of view QBRs from start to finish. So I've talked to MSPs, and you may know what I'm talking about, especially when we kind of look at your neighbors, your peers, whatever. I've talked to MSPs that disagree with the Q, right, in the QBR, and this is really common. It comes up a lot these days where QBRs, we use that as our blank generic term for quarterly business reviews. We're just talking about how you present your findings to your client, how you use this meeting as a sales and revenue opportunity for both you and your clients. Some people hate the Q. They don't care for the Q in the quarterly business review. Sometimes they don't even like the business review. So we've heard everything from QBR, TBR, tech check, tech review, you name it. And that makes it difficult to put a label on what this thing is even supposed to do and the cadence, right? I've had people that only work in assessments because to do a QBR, right? And now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to keep calling them QBRs, but know that I'm fully aware that you may call them something completely different. just bear with me. Some people only want to work in assessments, and a lot of dedicated QBR tools are functionally assessment tools. And the reason for that is that they are very easy to repeat. The downside is they are typically relatively manual, if sometimes very manual. So there's that. And then I have other people that think assessments is just completely the wrong way to go. And again, it totally varies MSP by MSP. Size does not seem to matter. Enterprise clients to one-man shops, it's all over the place. I know lots of MSPs that prefer their QBRs to come with printed reports with visuals because that's the way they hand it to their points of contact. And I have people that turn around and say that is the worst possible thing you can do. So where does that really land us? Because a lot of people swap their QBR tools like they change shirts. They're looking for a methodology they can believe in, something they can stick to, something that proves results. And the answer is they're still looking, right? So again, the MSP market has not quite settled, again, from a vendor's perspective, on the ideal way to run a QBR. So that being said, I want to talk about really how it works in CloudRadial and how we take this methodology, understanding that everybody's a little bit different, and how we facilitate you to bring your own beliefs and approach to the QBR methodology without really forcing a one-size-fits-all solution down your throat. Again, the downsides, as you're going to see, is that there is not a hyper easy path to do it, and that's one of the known things of CloudRadial. But the upside is, if you can kind of dream it, you can do it, and we will show you. So let's go with what we really focus on. So when I talk about QBRs, I focus on the end results because this is the stuff that more or less MSPs do agree on. So as long as we achieve these things, any of the business review method works. So does the client fundamentally understand what has happened, what we're offering in terms of value? Do we have a game plan for the future? And then do we understand costs and upcoming expenses? So as we look at CloudRadial, be thinking about these things, and to approach them, QBRs and CloudRadial, we're really after these results rather than the processes that are going to be quote unquote mandatory from MSP to MSP. So that's really all I have for the PowerPoint, and we're going to go straight to kind of looking at how it works. If you've ever been curious, say no more, because I'm going to show you in a very working demo and kind of talk through all the thought processes and how you can approach them one by one. And if you do want to follow up and you want to see more specific things, because obviously on the webinar, I'm going to cover a lot of high level stuff, and I'm not going to be doing like a feature or like a demo of every single thing in CloudRadial because it's a really big platform. Definitely book a demo. You can tell the person you end up doing the demo with exactly what you want to focus on. If there's a specific feature, if you want to understand a functionality, you can totally go ahead and follow up with that as well. But throw the questions in here, and I'm more than happy to answer them as we go along. So that being said, let's take a look at CloudRadial. Okay. So yes, I'm going to start by, let me pull up something else here I had on my side window so I can keep track of my own time. There we go. All right, so we're going to focus on how CloudRadial even approaches this. So as I mentioned, CloudRadial is a CSA platform. What that really means, let me de-technicalify that for you. It's a client portal that does a lot of stuff. It typically does a lot more stuff than like your built-in PSA portal probably does. And because of that, we really need to know where to focus because look at all these different things. Again, whether this is your first time seeing CloudRadial or you've seen it before and you're focusing just on the QBRs, I'm going to address the fact that most of these features are not going to be relevant for the QBRs. Which ones are not relevant? In this second tab, so this first tab is what I'm going to be running out of more specifically. That's where I'm going to be kind of focusing my efforts in talking through the features. This second tab I have open in my browser is going to show you what a typical end user sees. And when I'm talking about end users, I'm talking about, again, not your points of contact, who are typically the ones you're going to render the QBR with. We're talking about, your day-to-day people. Those people get stuff in CloudRadial that's like useful but not relevant for QBRs, like bookmarks and their ticket submissions and all that stuff. Where CloudRadial puts the QBR relevant material, relevant features is really in an area kind of south of all these features. So you see that we have these dividing lines. And for this webinar, we're certainly going to be focusing on these lines down here and focusing on what a key point of contact would be. So again, just flashing the difference, you're going to see that end users will not see this stuff. We do that to prevent overload for end users, right? And we don't want, leakage of any kind of stuff that doesn't matter. We certainly don't want to show anybody the wrong thing. So just already that mindset that we show people different things depending on their permission level. So when we get to the QBRs, we want to focus on automation. Now, automation with a capital A, right, is typically what people think of when they think of like RPA tools, commonly like Roost and Pia. But we're not talking about necessarily like workflow automations. We're talking about how much stuff can you pre-populate and how easy is it to repeat the process and get this thing working um, in a way that you can pretty easily build a process around it. So that's when I kind of introduced my first of the methodologies. So if you're coming to Cloud Radial and you're saying, "Hey, I've not really tried this, or I've tried to do QBRs, I haven't really done a great job, and I'm trying to figure out a structured way to do it. How might I approach it, and what features would I use in here?" Most MSPs, if not every MSP, is rendering services using some kind of tool stack and maybe even a homegrown solution of your own. In basically every case I've ever encountered, the tools you use have reports that generate. So one of the fastest, easiest ways to set up QBRs in Cloud Radial, and this is what a lot of people that are dipping their toes, just trying to get started, they'll just take the reports they have from their tools and they will send them to Cloud Radial. And the way that Cloud Radial works structure-wise is you're going to have a portal that you can get access to, obviously, that's what you pay for. And then each one of your clients gets their own basically individual portal and you manage it from this partner tab. So what this screen is showing you is that we have our Azure Technology and Blue Light and Phoenix Group and whatever, and these each have their own portal. And this is going to come into play when I'm going to talk about a little bit later how to review the QBR data, which is an equally important part of the QBR. So with this in mind, why I bring this up is that every single client is going to have different reports. I mean, chances are that you may render the same service for each one. Say your standard thing is a security offering or a backup, whatever you may have. There's probably something you're getting from a tool that has value that you may already use in QBR today that you want to forward in. So with this concept in mind, an individual company, we're just going to focus on one and I'll show you how it scales. Azure Technology, here's their portal specifically. They're going to have an area under a compliance tab for reports. And the easiest way to crack QBRs is just to set up report archives. So this is a really easy way to help the end user, the point of contact that you're working with, to understand that, like, yes, we are doing a ton of work that is typically not visible, right? Because a lot of reports go on in the background. A lot of these reports either get sent perhaps to the client whenever they're available and maybe ignored. Maybe they get lost in emails. Maybe they're undelivered. Who knows? So just by shifting the reports and proof of all the work that you're doing behind the scenes to your Cloud Radial portal, what you end up doing as a very basic QBR is you end up giving them the portal that does the fun stuff like the knowledge base and the bookmarks and stuff, but you end up being able to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, if you want to go check out the backup reports or the VCIO reports or whatever we have, you go straight to your portal, to your report archives, you click on a folder, and here we go, right? And they can see these reports. Now, these reports are going to be visible whether they're PDFs or HTML, and you can see my very professional report from my backup tool. This is a great backup tool. Um, they make their way in here. So simple thing, right? And what we've achieved in about 2 seconds is we're able to catalog and archive these things so that way they're available if we need to review them and see them, and they're out of the way if we don't, which is going to come into play when we actually have like a review session. These report archives are super simple because you can build folders for them. Like you can see here, I've got backups and Acronis and whatever. And the way that it ends up working is that when you click on any one of these folders, each one you can drag and drop reports. Most people just forward their reports directly in here via email address. And if you're savvy enough, I'm not super good at it, but they have an API as well. So you can send them in via API and do some fancier stuff with alerting. But this is even for my enterprise level clients that use Cloud Radial, this is one of the easiest ways to crack QBRs because a lot of times the traditional QBR, short of assessments, is spent reviewing previous data brought in by tools. Maybe it's the RMM, maybe it's backup security, you name it, even other VCIO tools. So just this one action is going to get you that result that you are driving people to your portal, you are facilitating the conversation with the end user, and again, if you are rendering the QBR yourself, it's really easy to say, okay, that was Azure Technology. Let's check out Brown Brothers Bottling. And here we go. We're going to jump into this company. Now we're into Brown Brothers Bottling. And when we get into Brown Brothers Bottling, that will fail to load, make me look foolish. Let's see if it loads up. Same thing, right? This has got report archives as well. So exactly the same concept. I go in here and they've got their own thing. What's cool about this too is you can set these up globally so everybody can have them. You can manage them really easily so that if you want to say, hey, every company gets a global security report folder, everybody gets a VCIO folder. One of the best things about CloudRadial is that if you want to set these up quickly, you can. So I'm just going to flash this on screen, just saying that like, hey, creating these globally and managing these globally is as easy as just setting and forgetting each forwarding rule. So that is my 2 second trip of how you can start a very basic QBR. If you're on this webinar, you're probably wanting to know more of how you can actually talk through the things, but this is a great place to start because it requires essentially no effort. Say you want to start really adding a lot of value and you want to figure out how CloudRadial can help and how you can start mixing and matching. So I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, you've got people that really don't do much with QBRs today, but then they want to kind of go towards that, like I may have some processes and I want to start integrating them in. Maybe I already have tools, maybe I have some more nuanced things. How do I get into that? From a pure data reporting perspective, this is where CloudRadial can start to offer some more interesting things. So when I get into, say, infrastructure reporting, this is a lot of times what people bring to the table for a traditional QBR. They start talking about inventory, they start talking about kind of stats on some technology, because that's what a lot of businesses end up wanting to see. So even inside of here, you can see that I went to infrastructure and endpoints, and what I'm seeing for this one company is I am able to show my client in a portal the endpoints that they have. So you can see this one's Michael's computer. I can click on it, right? And I can get that information kind of in real time. I can see what the deal is with this computer, everything from configuration to the software installed on it, you name it. So this is pulled from this comes up all the time, so I'll clear this up. This comes from a CloudRadial agent. It's not an RMM. Its purpose is specifically to bring in information into a portal for reporting purposes for QBRs. It's okay if you don't want to do that because again, the report archive is really easy. If you have something that does this and this is kind of matches your needs, you can always forward that stuff into the report archives, but I'll show you why I bring this up in QBR conversations, especially for automation purposes. So when we look at those kind of key goals I mentioned earlier, we want to show clients what we're doing. Report archives help that. This helps that. It shows the clients that we're monitoring key systems that we told them that we would be managing. But this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of impact for QBRs. If the point of a QBR is to draw strategic discussions, stack alignment between yourself and the client, showing them where their gaps are, showing them what opportunities they have, raw data from an RMM, heck, raw data from CloudRadial here isn't going to have much impact on that conversation. So our take is we take this data, we pipe it in here. We can also bring this in from Data RMM and even Adigi or our agent. And we can take this data and take it and put it into our compliance policy. So again, bear with me. I know I'm going to fly through a lot of features, but I want to show you what we're building towards. So a little bit more difficult than just throwing an email forwarding rule, but what we're building towards is by having that data captured, I end up being able to assign rules to it, which are what these policies are. And those rules are basically going to be able to tell me as the MSP and the client as well where we stand on things. And this is a lot easier to run as a conversation in a QBR. For example, if Crystal is my client, I'm fully confident that this is going to be a little bit overwhelming, but it's a lot easier to explain like, hey, we have some security issues, right? The classic red, yellow, green thing is used across a bunch of different tools for a reason, because it's really easy to grasp. And this elevates the conversation from Michael has an issue with security on his computer to, hey, we may have security issues as an organization. So what can we do about that, right? So say I want to pull a list of third-party, people who don't have the right antivirus. Now this becomes a company-wide security issue, a bigger strategic conversation, and this is the stuff that CloudRadial aims to do. A lot of this automation that we're talking about is not, again, workflow automation. It's automating a lot of the stuff that eats up a QBR conversation day to day. So you're not spending your time hovering over tickets or checking out individual endpoints or checking out a big RMM repository report. You're basically saying, here's what's interesting about that. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways because that's the irony of that phrase, that you have to set up some rules. Everything that you're going to see in CloudRadial already comes preloaded, so you don't have to necessarily build these from scratch. You just customize them. But a lot of these rules are built to your preferences. So if you want to monitor something on an endpoint and you have our agent and you want to say whether it's old or whether it's ready for Windows 11 is a super popular one, right? And you want to start flagging these things, this can be a really great component to the QBR. So by this stage, what ends up happening, and I did warn you guys at the beginning, one of the issues with CloudRadial is that there's not that clear path, right? Dedicated standalone QBR tools, you boot them up and they go click to run the QBR. You can see that with CloudRadial, I've already mentioned a couple features, right? We've talked about the report archives. This is the emails that we forward. We talked about just the raw infrastructure data. We talked about the policies. This is more of that middle level. So you're at the level where you want to showcase kind of what about the data we're getting, not just we're doing the work, but what about the work we're doing. And at this stage is where most people, like if you're going to use CloudRadial for QBRs, this is that effective stage. You want to introduce the planner, which I'm going to talk about repeatedly from here on out. So a lot of times this is what people expect when they think QBRs. They think something collaborative, they think something visual, they think something that they can get in and really have a conversation around. And when we look at this planner stuff, right, what you're going to see is that we have these conversation pieces that are literally set quarter by quarter. We have our recommended solutions and things to discuss. We have our immediate 4 quarters, and we can scroll through infinitely years forward and years past. And we also have what's been completed. So aside from just checking out reports, a lot of the QBR methodology in CloudRadial is about taking those things we said. How do I prove what I did? How do I prove what I'm doing? And how do I prove what we want to do, right? Budgeting discussions and fuel the planner because this planner is collaborative, right? You own CloudRadial. You can access this. The client can get into their portal and check out their planner. So the idea is that for Client A, Azure Technology, their planner looks like this. We have plenty of things to discuss, and I'm going to talk about how to populate this and why the policies and the other things make sense in this context. When we go to that other Brown Brothers bottling, we saw a couple of their reports come through and check it out. They have their very own planner, and their planner may look completely different. But our aim here is to structure our QBRs around the planner. It's to feed the planner with different bits of data from various systems, sometimes from CloudRadial, sometimes from third-party tools. But the idea is that we're building that collaboration on here. The reason is that if we can do that and we kind of take this card, Kanban, word bank approach, what ends up happening is we can pretty easily say, okay, we're going to check this tab, this tab, this tab. We're going to add these things to the planner, which again, I'll show. And we can repeat. When I open up a new planner, we can talk about doing that over and over again. I see some questions popping up, Crystal. Should I pause to answer or should I steamroll through and pretend I can't read? Because I can do either.
No, we can pause if you have a second. So there was one about email, but since you're on the planner screen, let's just go here. So just a couple questions. Is there more than one planner available for each client? And I'm going to go through so you can answer them all. Is
Sure.
there unique, let me try that again, customizable filtering available? And are the planner columns fixed? Can you go monthly instead of quarterly? So.
Great questions across the board. Okay, so multiple planners per customer, no. This is just the one planner board for the customer. Again, years infinitely, but you can't specifically have like a board A versus B. The reason for that is probably just development didn't think about it, but really it's because we want to be able to measure them in a systematic way, which is going to come back when we talk about the sales matrix towards the end. Um, Same thing for quarterly. So the reason it's quarterly and not monthly, the answer is no, but there's a reason for that as well. We talked about whether we wanted to have something super specific. So we wanted to say like monthly, weekly, quarterly, yearly, whatever, just like accordion, right? You can kind of pick your time frame. The reason we didn't do that is because this planner is not really connected to much, right? I mean, it's connected to some of the different fields inside of CloudRadial that feed it, that build the planner cards, but this is not going to go create products or do anything inside of your PSA. So for us, when we thought about the scale of creation of the planner, we thought we need to have something that's high enough level that's easy to understand, but not so detailed that you put a bunch of effort in here and then it's a pain in the butt to have to reflect this back and forth. So understandably for me, I'm like, I get the need for the monthly, but this is strictly quarterly. What was the third one? I think I glossed over.
There are unique customizable filtering available in the planner.
I'm going to say no. I'm not sure exactly what customizable filtering is because again, it's fairly simplistic, but this is kind of it as far as what you're getting. And again, there's more nuance to it that I'll cover when we get more into the advanced stuff, but on first glance, it kind of is what it is as far as looks. Um, was there one on report archives too? Were you saying
No,
about
there was
email?
something on email. So, okay, so for the non-integrated reporting, so the
Hmm.
email, is there a way to obscure the body of the email that has the report attached? So basically just
Yes,
word for
there is. In fact, when you set up a report archive, there's a literal option saying, do you want to show the message content or just have the attachment come through, which you can just uncheck that. And anything that gets its way into the email will just be the attachment. Because a lot of times the attachment or the email body itself is junk. So I totally get that.
that was the exact question. So thank you.
Yeah. The planner ones are interesting too. I totally get the concept for you guys. I know the answer to a lot of times when I'm like, yeah, no, is disappointing. But again, hopefully it'll make sense as to why we have it scaled the way we do as we go on. So again, the QBR methodology for us, super focused on those results. And the forte that CloudRadial has that other QBR tools don't is that what we lack in dedicated functionality, we make up for in collaboration. Meaning that, again, the strength to this is that the client is not getting yet another report out of context. The context exists in the portal alongside the stuff. Meaning, if I'm saying, hey, we need to fix a policy, they're not wondering what the heck a policy is or where that's coming from. They go, oh yeah, and you can walk through it with them and say that's coming from literally just this other tab over here. We're talking about these policies. So I bring up policies as typically this is where people start to expand and explore because they start to say, okay, take Brown Brothers bottling, right? It's one thing to show the planner cards like this. It's another thing to bring in relevant stuff for them. So if you're going from basic to kind of mid-tier and you're starting to really think through your QBR process, you start to run into how do you approach the QBR? How do you even start to talk about it? How do you start to talk about the services you have? So what you're seeing here is that we already have planner cards that exist inside of Brown Brothers bottling. Where do these come from? What are these? What CloudRadial launches with is it launches with a catalog of services. You can customize this, of course, but this is just the stock stuff that it comes with. And the idea for us is that at the very basic level, aside from just sending third-party reports, you can come to the planner and go, hey, let's say we're already doing managed IT services. That's part of our base thing. We're doing that for you. We want to talk about setting up some employee training programs in Q4. So let's drop that in there. And we're going to talk about a cloud migration or talking about maybe managing that ancient server to the cloud for Q2, right? So with very little work and effort, I basically have dragged a catalog of stuff. The forte here is that they can see all the other services they may not even know you do when they're recommended. So that way they have visibility on it. They see the immediacy of what we're actually recommending, right? Very high level. And obviously you can customize these cards and make them fancy. You can put videos, you can do whatever, or you can just have them be just text-based as like quick reminders. And then again, they remember what they're paying for. But a lot of the people that come to CloudRadial, they start going like, well, again, there's more nuance here, right? It's not just selling them stuff. It's not just helping them understand. It's driving recommendations for these things. So when we come back to my other tab, right? This is how the workflow kind of goes. You let the automation be the data that populates into CloudRadial. So again, those reports are getting auto forwarded. The infrastructure information is getting gathered, right? So every day this stuff checks in. So this is accurate, up to date. If you do the policies, that's up to date, right? So these things are fresh as a daisy, pretty accurate, cool, good to go. And then what we can do is I can say, hey, if I'm trying to talk about introducing managed services or managed security, let's use that as an example, and I want to have that discussion saying we would love to talk about doing managed security for you guys, right? Or insert whatever service you want. It's a lot easier to have context and describe that and talk through it if you have data in your portal that backs that up rather than just a sheet saying, trust us, right? So the approach in Brown Brothers bottling, you can see what I'm talking about here. If it was with Crystal, I would say, hey, we want to do managed services. I'm sorry, managed security. Here's what it entails. What do you think, right? Crystal may or may not go for it, and I could spend a bunch of time talking through the reasons. If I have data in the portal, so let's say I did my policies and they exist, the workflow of a QBR and CloudRadial can be that, hey, you've deployed your agents, they're automatically populating. So I would literally do this. I log into the portal, I go check out the policies on QBR day or before, whatever. I go, hey, maybe there's a security one that really speaks to the need for some management. So I click on one of these and I go, hey, and you're going to see that a lot of times what happens in that area that's not visible to the basic end users, I have this option to add to planner. So what I can do is I can basically cherry pick and shop stuff and quickly add it to the planner. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, here's an issue with the security policy if nobody has third-party AV. Here's all the offenders to it. Let me just chuck that on the planner and keep moving. Now, I don't talk about every single tab because there's a lot of them, but that's kind of the logic that you can have with a lot of stuff. So whether it's, say, 365 data, right? So let's say you have licenses coming in and you want to talk about, we need additional 365 basic licenses. This is just an integrated thing in here. Let's add that to the planner. If you're doing stuff related to M365 security to their, I don't know, how much email activity they're getting. So without me talking through every single one of these, what CloudRadial is actively doing is it's bringing in data from third-party sources, from itself, right? From the agent, from dashboards, which we'll talk about in a second. And it's giving you more and more fields to potentially look at to have these conversations. Ultimately, as I go through and I kind of decide what I like, as I come back to that planner, what's going to end up happening is I have rationale built in here. So when I want to talk about security or whatever, I can drag that over here and go, hi, I want to do managed security. Why? Let's start talking about what we're seeing here. Where are we seeing it? And you don't really have that moment where the client either doesn't understand or doesn't really believe you or whatever, because the context is in their portal. It's the same place they can go whenever they want to. When the QBR is over and they say, let me think about it, they're still going to have access to the data. They can still see it. And what this is really good for is it's good for showing that you have notated the issue. And a lot of times in that middle tier, when you start thinking about how to run a QBR, you even run into issues where yourself as an MSP wants to showcase that you caught an issue or you have plans for something. And sometimes it's out of your hands. Sometimes you've done your due diligence, you've recommended an item to a prospect, a client, or whomever, and they just don't care, or they just want to have that risk. So having this mutual planner board is a good way to also say, like, hi, let's take a look at what this planner card can do rather than just exist. So yes, you can modify it. Yes, you can do cool stuff to it. But a lot of times the partners that we have that really get into the QBR methodology, they'll do stuff like saying, hey, maybe your client declined fixing this, or we want to put a high priority. So a bunch of additional trigger on these planner cards to ultimately be able to visualize something like this, right? So now we've taken, you can see the difference, and this is why I have to do the whole preamble of methodologies and how CloudRadial approaches it. If you're looking for a place to do a real simple QBR, set and forget forward. Great. If you want to start adding information as you set up CloudRadial, you have more data fields to set, and you can start getting into that customization of planner cards. So now the conversation is Crystal declined it. In 6 months, she gets hacked. I can come back and say, we recommended it. Here's your signature. Here's whatever. Ta-da. We have a mutual kind of place to agree upon the plan. So again, back to that, why does it not monthly? Why is it not quarterly? Or how does the filtration work? Because this isn't syncing up with anything, you can see how this can get really unwieldy if you're super, super in the micro level, right? If you want to do preset planner cards, easy peasy. If you want to start adding stuff like from policies or from 365 data, whatever, to fuel discussions, totally game. If you want to start adding additional notations, you want to start putting pricing on stuff, right? Let's say that I want to go ahead and even show them estimations. I want to show a price. I want to show that to fix this security issue, we're going to start needing 10 licenses of AV, and it's going to cost us $50 a month for those 10 licenses, whatever. You can start seeing that now CloudRadial is doing this. It's pretty simple, but at least it gives them an idea that, like, hey, this is going to cost you another $500 a month starting Q3 or whatever, right? Getting to this level without, being a project management tool, you don't want to put too much effort into this because you're not tracking this anywhere. I mean, like, if you want to use this as a project management tool, I would go against it. I wouldn't think it's ideal, but we don't want you like living and breathing in the minutia. This is specifically to get that high level approval, and it kind of fits the bill where you want to showcase the client what's going on. Again, giving them that sense that you're tracking stuff high level and getting their approval or disapproval and then moving on. That's kind of the sweet spot that CloudRadial fits for QBRs, right? Whether you agree with it or disagree with it's another question, but that's kind of the way it's intended. So that kind of answers why we do or do not go to a level of depth of like a dedicated QBR tool, if that makes sense. Um, More questions popped up. Crystal, should I pause? Should I keep going?
No, no, real quick. So since you're on this section, just to confirm, you can't filter by the category or header, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just you can scroll through the column, but there's no specific filters for them.
Okay, cool. So next kind of same vibe, but is there, can you confirm if this pulling existing information from tools already in place, like ConnectWise, or things like that? And on that, are the integrations or planner cards tied back to like the opportunities within the PSA? That one?
So yes and no, and I'll say why yes and no, because you can see these toggles right here, right? We've got the planner cards coming from CloudRadial. Then you've got a couple of different toggles here. So what we did a while ago is we took a look at the connected PSA systems, and this is an aside from the QBR conversation. I'm just talking to you guys in general. CloudRadial is, again, that CSA tool, and the way that it's really intended to work, it can work standalone. It can work with just email addresses. It doesn't need a PSA connected to it. But when you have a PSA like ConnectWise or Autotask or Halo, Synchro, and then BMS are the five we support like back and forth, we get more information, right? So what we do with that information, in this case that we're looking at on screen right now, this is connected to ConnectWise PSA. So what happens is, depending on the connection that we have with that tool, and depending on what we can fetch back and forth, we can pull some stuff. So you can see, I think it may have been in the last quarter, there's a quotes toggle. So this is opportunities. So what's happening is my data is going to be junk because I'm connected to a test tenant. But either way, I have my opportunities coming in from the PSA in this specific case. And they're going to be a different color, but at the very least, I can choose whether to include them or not. Same thing with projects. Because for us as CloudRadial, we said there's things that we want to talk about in general, top level services, backup, whatever. Then there's the things that fuel those discussions, and then there's stuff that's like maybe you want to talk about outstanding quotes, right? Things that you need approval on or need to discuss. Maybe you want to talk about project initiatives because depending on the PSA, we sync with those projects as well. And those definitely have a place in conversations, but a lot of times what you're going to notice is that there may be inconsistency between PSAs because certain PSAs either have that available to pull through. I don't want to lose anybody with technicalities, but sometimes they have those available via API. Sometimes that API performs very well. ConnectWise and Autotask, for example, are ones that work great. We can pull that in. We can choose to decide whether we want to include stuff in that from quotes from projects or not. And other times we don't. So the PSA connection thing is tricky because we don't write back to it, but we can pull some stuff in depending on the PSA. So that would be a case truly. I'm not just I hate this answer from salespeople. I'm a product guy. I promise. I'm not doing this on purpose. But like that would be a case where it's like it's so specific it may be demo by demo per person, right? Because you'd have to look at what are you pulling in, what do you want to pull in, can CloudRadial do it, and then you make the decision. Just because if you're banking on a QBR system that shows quotes in addition to services, in addition to whatever, it may be a fit, and sometimes it's not, right? So it really is case by case for that. But there is some functionality there depending on your PSA connected. That's a great question though, because I wish more people thought about the cohesion, right? Everything together in a QBR is tough. Usually a QBR is 30 minutes, an hour with somebody, and you have to explain a ton of information that is really hard. Even me, I talk a mile a minute, and I'm trying to do this with you guys, and you guys are technical. It's hard to explain the value and the potential of something when you have little time. So how do you showcase projects and quotes and key initiatives, whatever? And that's why we stick to that higher level planner so people can just get an idea and taste. And again, that's part of our limitation as to why we don't sync everything, because then it just becomes a project management tool. And really we're not built for it, and it's not very good to do in CloudRadial for it specifically. Good stuff. I try to be honest too with my limitations. If anything comes up, please keep asking. It's great questions. So usually at this point, I'm saying, okay, again, I'm not going to flash that PowerPoint again, but that methodology thing is really important because I'm all about whatever way you approach this, right? Maybe you have your third-party tools. Maybe you want to do the agent stuff. Maybe you want to pull in some stuff from third parties. Again, Microsoft is a good example. What about really more advanced stuff? Because again, your traditional QBR tool for a lot of people is like assessment based, and those assessments can get really, really complex. Not always, but a lot of times they can get really, really complex. So you're left with this kind of open question mark. What is the right level of intensity, complexity, whatever, of the QBR? So when we look at some of the more advanced echelon stuff of CloudRadial, you start to get into what in this kind of area down here fits the bill there. So let me mention a couple of things here. So again, depending on the PSA, like I mentioned for the cards, the quotes, and the project and stuff, you may have some success getting your information part of the QBR from here. I wouldn't usually consider this QBR stuff. I've had MSPs disagree with me, so I'll mention, right? Sometimes people like to review stuff like the projects, right? So in this case, again, this is ConnectWise. We're pulling in the projects, we're pulling in the project tickets. Sometimes it's you want to discuss the opportunities or the quotes, right? You're also going to notice this in CloudRadial. We call things different things. So again, opportunity in CloudRadial, I'm sorry, in ConnectWise is quotes in CloudRadial. We're cognizant of the fact that because you're putting in a client portal in between, we don't necessarily want to call stuff what it's actually called in your PSA system because it either sounds very salesy and or just confusing to the end user. So purposefully, you'll see things called differently in Cloud Radial than it is in the PSA. But these, for all intents and purposes, are opportunities, right? They're quotes. But invoice is another example. So a lot of times with these PSA systems, we sync in the stuff that usually may be a discussion point in the QBR, right? I've had MSPs that just want to talk about new opportunities. I have MSPs that want to review tickets and inventory, outstanding invoices, whatever, right? It depends on the nature of the client you're dealing with, but CloudRadial likely integrates components of that to have for review inside of the portal, right? So it's very case specific, but it's totally fair game. So usually when I talk about CloudRadial's QBR process, I'm largely talking about the planner and what feeds it, but this totally is fair game. Dashboards is another really great one because you've got a lot of power in CloudRadial to go through and check out tab by tab. A lot of times people just want a good old visualization. This stuff in here, let me delete my SharePoint test. Come on, me. I'm just dropping tests all over the place. I never clean up my demo environment. Nobody wants to work with me. Ugh. Anyways, so visualizations of the same data that we can get in CloudRadial, right? Sometimes you don't want to dig through 80 tabs to go get the stuff. Sometimes you want to just have this pulled up, easy to read. You want to give the client a quick way to see it, and the dashboards are a good way to do it. So I know I didn't specifically talk about ticketing. Ticketing is one of the most popular use cases for CloudRadial just because we have a cool catalog. It sends stuff over to your connected PSA. Huzzah! But what a lot of times happens more, not from the submission perspective, but from the QBR perspective, is people want to review the tickets that came in. So look at all these tickets that I can see that are syncing back and forth with, in this case, ConnectWise, right? It doesn't have a lot of value to show clients one by one that Evan's having an issue with his computer being broken. But what has more value is that data visualized in a dashboard saying, hey, we got 23 tickets this month, who's our top submitter and so on and so forth, right? Again, the life of a vendor means my data is largely junk, but it still proves the point that we're doing this. So too are we trying to visualize a lot of the other stuff. So those policies, maybe CloudRadial has training built in, right? So maybe the course completion takes a part of the QBR process. So for compliance or cybersecurity, it's who's outdated OS, who's completed that HIPAA course, what outstanding exceptions do we have in the policies, right? So we're again aware that we don't necessarily want to have people jumping through a million tabs. Maybe we want to have the specifics shown up here. And in that more advanced use case, right, I always do it kind of like a rev limiter. Beginner, we saw forwarding. Middle is when you're starting to kind of aggregate stuff. My super advanced people have Power BI, they have Bright Gauge, they have all kinds of custom visualizations. And their goal is not to go CloudRadial replaces everything. We're looking for a tool that does it because they've either accepted or purposefully said, no tool does it all. We are trying to put it in front of clients in a way that makes sense. So when it comes to dashboards, maybe you want to literally frame in something of your own, which is a super popular thing people do as a part of the QBR process. So it's an iframe. It's not something super crazy, but at the very least, you can take information, frame it in, have this visible to them. So ultimately, we'll see if my cybersecurity map loads up. Ultimately, they can see the information and visualize it in the same way that they can in the planner. So again, easier to access, easier to understand, and then finally they can make decisions off of it. So looking at a dashboard about security is easier to get than looking at a big old grid of data like this, right? So a lot of the information here is just changed how we display it. The last bit I talk about with advanced usage, because I talked about that assessment functionality, is what if you hit that advanced level where a lot of the automation power of Cloud Radial is just automatic import and automatic translation into grids and fields, right? We know the data is coming from the RMM tool from Data RMM. In this case, it's not, but it would look the same. Maybe one would take that, put that into a policy. That's all happening automatically for you. Assessments, which is what a lot of people do for their QBRs, are largely not automated. This is true in many systems, not just CloudRadial, but CloudRadial is an example. However, we also know the value and see the value in assessment tools as part of a QBR conversation. So if you are part of the more advanced use case, know that you can run assessments in CloudRadial as well, and you can have them be part of the QBR discussion. So in my advanced use cases, I have people that do this solely. They skip the planner, they skip the policies, and they do this as their QBR, and that's okay as well. So I'll use the example of a NIST assessment, which can get very, very complex. This is actually stock content in CloudRadial, as is the onboarding assessment. But what you can do is you can take an assessment, you can run it multiple times, you can compare runs against each other to show progress over time. And it's pretty much what you would probably hope to see, right? Categorized views that start with dashboards because, again, we're client first, right? We're not necessarily an assessment tool. We are a client portal with assessments in there. And a lot of times when you get into the details, right, you can have something super, super complex like this that goes to needs attention, we're not compliant, whatever. We did an assessment webinar, and I think it's on our YouTube. So if you want to know the ins and outs of this, it exists. But the gist is that if you want to have a conversation and you're more of that compliancy, higher security level, having a client-facing assessment tool means that you have a lot better QBR experience showcasing, hey, we're going to do supply chain risk management policies that you don't have. That may not be a quick little ticket. That may be a planner item. That may be a big discussion, right? Let me go down to something that we haven't touched. Inventories of software. Okay, maybe that's something we want to talk about as building and becoming like a core part of our plan working together. Maybe that's a planner item. So when I add stuff like this to the planner, it can link it back and forth, just like we did with the policies, right? Here we go, cool. And then I'll say, hey, this is a security issue, whatever, right? I'll just do test. But the gist here is that it's not just the same source over and over again. So my downside is your upside. I can't tell you what features make up your QBR. What I can tell you is once you figure out the ones that you want, the idea of scaling them is the exact same. And that's the forte, the strength to CloudRadial. We get into the data that's deployed. You can make sure each tenant is basically especially when you first start out, a template, right? You basically have the same assessments ready to run, the same planner cards ready to go, the same policies. So whether I'm doing a QBR for company A or company B or Digital Torch, Evans Bakery, you name it, right? Tev Tech LLC. When I go into that client, I know exactly what I'm hitting in here, what I want to see, and ultimately where that ends up for the conversation, right? I want to have the same conversation driven by the same kind of sets. That is the actual biggest gain in CloudRadial from a QBR perspective, is the consistency in how you do it. I have a reward for those that do it this way, and this is why we do it in this system. If you can kind of buy into the methodology of the repeatable process, right? You suffer in the complexity, and you also suffer in the fact that you don't necessarily have the same process, right? Because client A can be different than client B. But if you focus on using the planner from client to client, it does something that a lot of other tools can't, which is it's one thing to see every single company's client planner, right? One by one. When you set it up and you really have that well organized, you can actually review the global planner, client planner, which is like across every client, you as the MSP. So seeing a full grid of data, and this one is filterable and customizable and everything, shows you basically what's outstanding. And what a lot of our partners do is they use this for the sales matrix functionality, which basically means you have a consistent set of data, you have the same columns and everything. Show me all the clients all the services and show me who's got what and when, right? Whether it's declined, whether they're not even offered it, whether we're doing that, whether we have it planned. And this is what you get into when you talk about budget prep, budget planning, you name it, right? So the upside of keeping the standard methodology and framework is that you yourself get a standard framework to measure up, right? So collaboration means that you get more yeses. And that's the benefit of doing a simple planner approach because clients get a more approachable QBR experience rather than spreadsheets or report dumps. Um, you get more compelling stuff because, again, people understand the context behind it. You get a lot faster repeatability because you're working off of a word bank. And the other benefit is that you choose what gets in there, right? And however works for you, you don't have to use. In fact, most people do not use every feature to fuel their planner because it's just too much to manage. So you figure out the right thing and you rinse and repeat per person. One of the final things I mentioned is that I mentioned in the PowerPoint when I was talking about some people hate assessments, some people like assessments, some people like printed reports, some people hate printed reports. CloudRadial, one of the best things about it is the availability, right? Because you can totally just send somebody to portal.yourmsp.com and they can get into their QBR tool, right? Same place they log their tickets and get their bookmarks and stuff. It's available inside of Teams. It's available inside of a desktop application, and all these are white labeled and branded to you. And you can render the QBRs from there with them. And if you are a big proponent of a printed thing and you have executives, you want to store and log times that you ran, right? You want to say, how was last month's report, last quarter's report compared to today? How do you do that? Can you do that? The answer is yes. So in CloudRadial, when you go to partner and settings, there's a section for our report layouts. And we had requests for a lot of partners to say like, hey, I want to do a printable report. It's okay that it may not ever get read, but I want to have that available. So our report layouts comprise of those pages, right? It's pretty simple. They're not reorderable or anything, but you just choose what makes its way in there. You can have them visible to end users, which is another upside. So if you're really trying to get into and push self-service in the portal, this is a great way to do it because you can literally say, show this option or not. And what happens is you can see that it's saying like, do you want to review the account with the planner cards? And then maybe the infrastructure, so all the technical data, the details, the summary, the license reports, you name it. And you can see that we've built a couple here, right? A couple different ones. So if you have that available and if you have that available to clients, they can go directly to their account and reports and pull a report of how their company's doing, right? How is everything going in a simple view? I hate this. I always tell MSPs don't do it, but I understand if you want to. Why do I say I don't do it? Because if I hit this comprehensive report, what's about to load is about 100 plus pages of data. And this is what we originally wanted to get away from with QBRs. We didn't want print and present reports because in an hour, there's no way you're going through 100 plus pages of report. You're either skipping around or just dropping it on the desk and running. This thing is not lagging out or breaking. It's trying to run a 138-page report. I always have to do this explanation while I do this. I'm like, yes, I am aware that there is a red bar stuck. It is putting together a massive report because there's a ton of data in here. Again, if you need it, it is totally warranted. And actually, it did crash out. Psych. Whoa. Never had that happen before. Let's try to run a lighter report, shall we? Oh, no, it didn't. There's 136-page report. That's one of the few cases where wait was the right option, not quit out of the tab. My bad. But the point is, it does that report. It's branded, it's labeled, it's the exact same thing. I'm going to try to run it again so I can actually show you guys on screen. Maybe we'll do a license report. Similar, should be quicker to run. But the gist is, you can have this available for them if you like, right? 4-page report, a little bit more reasonable. Hey, a few licenses. Whatever way you want to do it, right? And again, this is where the flexibility of CloudRadial is nice because you decide where exactly you fit into your QBR process. I may pause there, Crystal, because that is a lot of information to gather and send to everybody. But the gist is, here is where your QBR takes place. Plenty of features to do it. And I'll even say this, I know if you're watching this webinar, chances are you are not a CloudRadial customer, which is A-OK. But I actually did this for my own partners. And the QBR process is so kind of, what's the right word here? it's so volatile because it changes from person to person, from MSP to MSP, and the processes, people disagree with each other, that I even brought in a bunch of sample data, right, from different MSPs that say it should be done this way, this way. And I even have stuff in here saying like, hey, there's customization guides. So if you're trying to build your own process, we already have stuff that people have built that say this is what really worked for us. Specifics on what comprises the QBR. So again, license and inventory and compliance, whatever. These are the key features that do it. And you basically just say, I want to use this, I don't. And when you kind of figure out what works for you, it's just about repeating those processes. And that's the gist of the QBR in CloudRadial. All right, Crystal, any questions? Because I know I took up the whole time. Sorry, everybody.
No, I think you did a great job. So kind of asked the questions as we went along, but one of the ones that came in from Nicole, is the SOC 2 compliant report one of the assessments available for?
Mhm. We have a couple of ones that for my demo tenant data, I don't have it. We have SOC one, there's a GDPR one, there's a NIST one. A lot of times I don't include them in whether it's a demonstration or even a one-on-one, just because I don't have them, and a lot of people are like, that's irrelevant to me. But what we do is for the assessment functionality specifically, which is important for those that are assessment minded, we have import functionality as well. So basically, if you can get your hands on anything Excel wise or even PDF, we can do a conversion. We can upload that in and put that in. So we have stock stuff. It usually lives in our community, but if you have something you want to try out and put in there of any type, you can get it in here. And you can see that SOC 2, I know, is floating around the community. There's SOC 2, Type 2, there's all kinds of stuff, but it doesn't have to be. It can even be stuff that's non-technical. So again, my onboarding one is like real simple. So short answer, yes. Long answer is yes, comma, and we can customize a whole bunch more. Good
Awesome.
question.
Yeah. I'll ask some great questions today. So,
Yeah, that was really good. Good job, guys. Usually I get people going like, does it, how do I log in? And I'm like, yeah, that's one of the questions.
oh, this group kept you on your toes.
Did it. Good job.
That's it for my side.
I saw one more pop up before I end it. Nothing worse than a
No,
question popped up.
thank you.
Oh, you're
You're
welcome.
welcome, Nicole.
You're so welcome. Okay, well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it. And again, I'll flash it up, but it's really simple. If you want to take another look or if you have specific questions, check it out, cloudradio.com/demo or radials.io/demo. It's a short link to that anyways. I really, really, really appreciate your time. I know evaluating tools is the best. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We're very, very nice and very approachable. So every single person, I think I'm the most unprofessional. Usually people will be more serious than I am. So the experience only goes up from here, I believe.
Yeah. Just one thing I don't think we touched on is yes, we will be sending out a copy of this recording later today or tomorrow, but we will get it over to you guys.
Thank you, Crystal.
Um,
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you spending some time with me and have a great rest of your day. I'll see you around. Bye.